This is one of the stories that took place between 1988 and 1989, while I was serving in the army at a barracks in the city of São Paulo. I prefer to omit his name to avoid any further problems. Perhaps because it was the oldest barracks building in São Paulo, and because of the various functions it had served during its existence, certain things always happened there. This list of functions includes a sanatorium that at the beginning of the 20th century, since it was founded before the beginning of that century, received all individuals who had very feared and contagious diseases such as tuberculosis and syphilis. It is important to note that being sent to this sanatorium was not an act of charity as it may seem, because when a person was sent to this place, it was almost certain that their destination would be a cemetery near the property, which was built thanks to the kindness of a lady who donated the land where it stands today. This good soul acted in this way because the health authorities at the time prohibited the return to the city of the bodies of people who died in this place and from these diseases. Due to the potential danger of contagion, they could not be buried in the traditional cemeteries of the capital. The old sanatorium and current barracks is now located within the city, but in those days it was outside its limits and in an area that was considered remote and isolated. Before this necropolis existed, I never found out what happened to those who died there. In this scenario, it can be assumed that many people met an unfortunate fate after crossing the gates of this historic building because they would literally be crammed together with other people who were sicker than they were, condemning them to a shorter life than they might have had if they had not been sent there. I confess that I myself did not witness any of the events that took place there during the period I was doing my military service, and I even think that bad things avoided me. But for some of my friends, this was not the case. One of them, who worked in the infirmary, told me what I thought was the most impressive story that happened there, on a day when I was not on duty at the barracks. We were soldiers from the CCSV, Commando and Services Company, and our quarters were above the kitchen and the soldiers' and sergeants' mess hall. To get there, we climbed a very steep wooden staircase, which had a very high ceiling. It is, and still exists, very long, around 40 meters long by 15 meters wide, and was divided by cabinets into two wings, with our bunk beds on the side facing the interior of the barracks. The windows that let in light from outside were large, but they were at a height that was impossible to reach unless you climbed on top of the lockers or bunk beds, and the only way in and out of the room was via the aforementioned staircase. Due to the age of the building, creaking in the wooden structures that supported the roof was common, as well as in the floor made of wooden planks, which we waxed every week, forcing it to maintain its shine. Normally, there are those whom the army calls barracks guards, which are 3 soldiers who take turns watching over everything that can happen inside the barracks 24 hours a day. However, during the night shifts, it is normal for these guards to sleep, even at the risk of being caught sleeping on duty. And that is what happened that night. The duty soldier was asleep during the incident. Even without knowing half of the stories I have described in this text, all the soldiers knew that the shadows of the barracks had to be avoided at night. After the lights went out, the barracks were a rather scary place, and falling asleep quickly was usually the best solution to lessen the discomfort of being there. The dim light that came in through the windows at night did nothing to help the situation, making it even more frightening. In general, the guards stayed close to the stairs at all times, and even though many soldiers slept there, they avoided patrolling inside to reduce the risk of seeing something. My friend was sleeping there with a few other soldiers when the events began to unfold. It was late at night, and he had taken a while to fall asleep. His peace was short-lived as the temperature seemed to drop suddenly, disturbing him. So he began to stir in bed and wake up, thinking about getting another blanket to continue sleeping. Before he could do so, he was startled by the sound of something falling on the floor. It was a sound that sounded like a boneless body hitting the floor. The shock was enough to freeze him and paralyze him for a few seconds. The noise had been very loud and came from the direction of the door. Why hadn't the barracks guard taken any action? Plucking up his courage, he looked toward the entrance and saw that the guard was asleep. However, despite the dim light coming from the door, he saw a trail marked with a liquid that looked like blood coming from there and heading toward the bunk bed in front of him, where 2 soldiers were sleeping. When he looked at the end of the trail, he still had time to see what appeared to be the two hind legs of a mangy pig, dragging itself under the bunk and disappearing into the darkness that dominated the space below it. The only movement he dared to make was to breathe. He didn't dare do more than that. When he noticed the soldier sleeping on the top bunk under which the pig had hidden was perhaps more wide-eyed than he was. The soldier on the bottom bunk was fast asleep, making a discreet movement with his head, as if asking his other companion, "Hey, did you see that?" He received a silent and affirmative answer, which did nothing to reassure him. Now what? It wasn't a nightmare he was having, which would have been preferable to this situation. What to do? After a reasonable amount of time, nothing else happened, but the thing was still there. He hadn't seen it leave because he hadn't taken his eyes off the place where it had entered since it did so. Looking again, he noticed that the blood trail was gone and that his companion in the other bunk was still awake. Realizing he didn't have much choice and driven as much by curiosity as by the need to know if that strange event was over, he decided to check the place where that creature had gone. He slowly climbed down from the bunk bed where he slept alone and reached the wooden floor which creaked under his weight. Frozen with fear, he waited a moment. Summoning up his courage, he began to bend down. When his eyes reached the bottom of the other dormitory, he glimpsed two bright red eyes dominating the darkness. At that moment, a strange pig-like sound that seemed to be drowned in a viscous liquid came from there, and he, terrified and not knowing what to do, climbed quickly back onto the bunk bed and wrapped himself in the blankets. In the meantime, he heard the sound of knees banging frantically on the floor, fading into the distance and heading toward the dormitory door. This time my friend didn't want to see anything. He stayed wrapped in the blanket until he was overcome by exhaustion and fell into a tense sleep that ended with the sound of reveille, which revealed the face of another soldier, as tense and tired as he was on the bunk right in front of him. They got out of bed and the comment was brief and conclusive. "What was that?" "I don't know," was the answer. The soldier who slept on the bottom bunk said he hadn't seen or heard anything strange during the night. The guards, according to them, stayed awake during their shifts and also hadn't seen or heard anything. I heard this story sometime later from my friend, and I can say to this day that I believe him, as he was always someone I trusted implicitly in that barracks and in those days. Apart from this strange incident, others involving officers on duty were observed on other nights and remained without reasonable explanation. The protagonist of this story remained in the army after I left, and if he is still there, I believe he is now a sergeant. I left there to get on with my life without ever having seen anything abnormal happening in that old sanatorium, but I never doubted that something strange still haunts those buildings. If you liked this video, share it, subscribe and leave a like. Videos in English and Portuguese every day.